for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God, liberty and justice for all. All righty, Peter Sheridan appears to be in here twice. But that's okay. Nobody's in the waiting room. Apparently no public comment, so let's get right to the show. Mr. Harrington, thank you for joining us. Would you care to go over the document that you sent us?
All right, so everyone has it?
Yes.
Yes, so good.
Yeah.
So I included number one just as a reminder of the funding, because we just wanted to make sure everyone kept the I guess the rules in mind as we made decisions toward the end. I think everyone knows that EFC seemingly out of the blue to me want to consider closing your project. And you know, from a technical perspective, we're just getting finished with the prime piece of the project. And I think, as we all remember, the success of this component of treatment was maybe a little uncertain. And I think, at least my recollection was that we were going to install this treatment, monitor it, we didn't need to do anything else. So from a technical perspective, I'm comfortable in terms of needing to close in December. Yet I'm aware that the interest rate concerns of waiting a year are certainly important and need to be considered. So again, number one basically just says your project's going to be funded at 60% grant, and wherever you stop spending money, that 60% is calculated at that time. Again, we can refer back to this section as we need to, but it's just there for reference. With all that said, just kind of give you a recap of where we are with the current contract. Contract number 3 is for the spray aeration treatment, which you know, is basically installed within the tank. And there was some glitches in the startup, but as of about noon today, the aeration system is finally up and running. That was good news, because next Monday is your regular sampling for disinfection byproducts, and we'll get at least a first glimpse of how well it works. So again, that was very good news that they got that done today. Next Monday is the sample I just discussed, and your next sample thereafter would be in August. Item letter E is basically saying it would be really nice to have the August data point to know if we've got to do anything more with this. That has been historically, you know, your bad worst case month. Depending on what DOH and EFC tell us tomorrow, will tell us if we have time to squeeze in any more sampling before making decisions on whether to move forward with additional work using project funds. Any questions on that? Okay, so with that said, I'll just move on to just kind of a recap of where we're at. It's been a while since I've been at a meeting, and I just figured now's the time. We just want to make sure we didn't forget to do anything that somebody wanted. So the project budget included essentially the DBP work, which we just described what we were doing, and also your distribution system work. The distribution system work primarily consisted of the valve repairs. If you remember, all the valve bonnets, or a lot of them, were corroded and needed to be replaced. The DPW's efforts saved the village an awful lot of money on this. We had to contract out about $65,000, but there's 15, or it might have been $20,000 in miscellaneous village costs to buy pieces and parts, but pretty much all the labor was just done as part of village time. And if that were all had to be contracted out, we had estimated upwards of $250,000 to do that. So that was a significant undertaking by DPW. And as much as I try to ask John if there's anything else that's needed, he keeps coming back with really nothing else needed in the distribution system. There were kind of catch-all categories there that we could do some additional work, valve replacement, hydrant replacement, and that sort of thing. But there's really nothing that anyone feels is necessary to do. One of the major items we identified was the booster pump station for New York Ave to increase pressure up there. But that never really, aside from being in the report, never seemed to gain much traction. And it's my firm belief that really nobody in the village is interested in doing that. If that's different, we can switch gears here. But I believe that the current thought is that if anyone develops the parcel on top of New York Ave, it'll be for them to put in this booster station that would also benefit, current customers with low pressure. So again, I'll ask, is there any questions on what I've covered thus far?
Yeah, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just a question on the distribution system improvements. We certainly have other issues in the village that need attention, but we're not talking about those things in with this particular segment of the grant, correct?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. I mean, miscellaneous improvements in distribution could mean a lot of things. So from my experience with DOH, who is the determines eligibility, it's things are pretty wide open, I've seen. So what did you have in mind?
Well, it was just a happenstance. Yesterday I was outside talking to a neighbor, and I noticed that John and one of the contractors who normally does some of our drainage work were looking at pulling a couple manhole covers and whatnot. And we know, and we've known for years, there's a I don't know if it's a storm drain or it's the end of the line, basically. It's across from my house. It's adjacent, right next to a neighbor's driveway. And the thing has been sinking for years. And it's even more and more sinking. And I don't want to go into details because I'm not the expert on this, but they were pulling a couple covers from there, which is on Clark Avenue down to Burlington. and then Burlington over to Saratoga. And they were speculating that, this stuff is essentially falling apart. It's been since the 70s, it's galvanized pipe. And, we've clearly one part of it is just sinking into the ground. But, is that the kind of thing, assuming you didn't have the money for it in your budget, is that the kind of thing that you could tap into for something like this?
Well, the distribution, it needs to be water system based.
Yeah, okay.
So unless it involves doing something to correct deficiencies with the water system, it really wouldn't be eligible. If it was relocating a water main to address some issue like you're talking about, then it could possibly be done. Or to move something that was too close to a water main, there is that loose possibility. But anything that's drainage or maybe sanitary sewer related would not normally be covered under this. So as much as I claimed it was a catch-all, the caveat is that it had to be water system based or related.
Yeah, that's fine, and I'll leave it to the experts to come back to you guys and the board on it. But it was just I just happened to be outside when these guys were walking around, and then this came up tonight, so that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. But
Gotcha.
I can hear from John, we can hear from John and see what he has to say.
Okay. Any other questions thus far? Okay, we can always double back if we need to. I was just summarized project expenses to date, and Jess would know as much or more about this as me, but I basically captured costs through request 7, which was recent, fairly recent. And one of the little, as we were looking at things, we realized that our billings didn't agree with what was on the EFC expenses. And we realized that actually EFC helped us discover that 2 of our invoices had never been submitted. And this was probably intentional at the time, and maybe we just forgot to go back and resubmit them. But to date, we're at this, we'll call it $450,000 number. And Gary, if you could scroll to the next. This next group is, in addition to the 450, we've got the base contract remainder for Stilsing, which is a little over 10,000. The Stilsing change order for the propane piping, about 3,700. The balance in our current amendment, just shy of 3,000. Your bond counsel cost, assuming they bill to their full estimated amount, and local counsel, same thing, assuming they bill to their full estimated amount, adds another 25,000. So add those 2 together, you're in the 475 range. I say 485 down below just to leave a little bit of fluff for something I might have forgotten. So those are, that might be your, if you decide to shut the project down now because you're comfortable that we've solved the DBP problem, you'd be looking at this 485 number. And that compares to the 1,185,000 number that was the modified project. Potential future costs, and here is where I feel like I just have to do my job and tell you what was in the project at one time that you haven't done yet. And the first item is pretty small number. It's a leak survey. John, John wouldn't object to doing this, but he also doesn't feel like it may be worth it or necessary, because he feels that the village water use hasn't changed much since the new system, if you will, was built in 2000. So one way to look at that, though, is if you do a leak survey, you can confirm that your system's in good shape for a relatively low cost.
Mike, what exactly is a leak survey?
If you all your pressurized water piping, there could be slow leaks at various locations, possibly at water taps, water services. These surveys, they basically used equipment to correlate where leaks are. They basically listen for them. They use sensitive equipment to decipher and correlate where leaks are. And really that's all that it is. But what you might find is a background leak that's always been there that might be worth correcting. So I don't know, did I adequately explain that?
I was just wondering if it was like taking meter readings and compare them.
No, that would be an audit that you would do internally yourself normally. This is out in the field. They hook up instruments, devices to hydrants and valves, and basically in a sophisticated way listen for leaks and try to, through that process, basically pin down where you have some leaks.
Just I didn't know if anybody, I'm here, so if anybody has any questions, I'm right here.
Oh, all right, good, John. Did I characterize your thoughts on that okay?
Yeah, pretty much. When the system was put in, it was all pressurized and tested for a period of time, each section, before it was passed by DOH. So I'm pretty confident on the numbers that a gallon flows of daily averages, what we had when the system was first put into use. And our numbers really haven't changed much since that point of time, slightly only due to Griffin's Ridge. So yeah, you explained it pretty well.
Yeah, and just to clarify, these are specialized companies. This is all they do. We would just set up a direct contract with the village. They probably do it in a day or two, and then John has some work to locate valves and that sort of thing, maybe, but he's probably already done that through the valve project. So let's see. The next idea that came up was that we kind of do a formal inventory and mapping project for all your water valves, your hydrants, and your curb stops. Curb stop, another name is for a service valve or shut off. The idea would be we'd map these with some sort of pretty accurate, almost survey grade GPS equipment. That equipment could either be rented, where we help you collect the data, or somebody else helps you collect the data, or you could possibly purchase that equipment so you'd have it so that if you needed to go find something buried in the snowbank, you'd have the device to lead you right there, to that location. We've just started getting quotes on this. I think this number is a bit conservative, but if you guys were interested in this, we'd have to just sit down with you and figure out what you wanted in terms of equipment and or deliverables for that.
Like, does conservative mean too high or too low?
I believe the number will be less based on a couple of the quotes we saw today. It's just, I don't know if those quotes marry up to your expectations or not.
John, what is the current state of maps for these?
We have a paper map showing the valves that are all in the roads. And we have a book with measurements to the water shutoffs, to the services, to the houses, which is pretty accurate, although as time goes on, a lot of these houses and things have been changing, which changes the measurements. So if you don't catch it, for instance, on Janes Ave, they changed the house and the measurements went right out the window, and it took me quite some time to locate that shutoff. As far as Griffin's Ridge and Victoria Landings, we have nothing. They would absolutely be worthwhile GPSing.
We've been asking both of them for a while for as-bills. Have we not?
Yes, and even if they give you an as-bill, I don't know, you'd have to look into that more, if it would include the service shutoffs for the houses.
So this would be helpful.
It would be extremely helpful. Even right at this moment, if I got called up there, I'd be concerned if it was at nighttime and I had to locate a shutoff. The main valves, they're pretty much, I know where they are. Not that somebody else would, but I know where they are. But finding a shutoff to a resident's house, I would be concerned.
As I understand it, let's say you have to find a shutoff to somebody's house. In theory, what would happen is all these would be located, and John would look up, punch in the coordinates for that shutoff for that house, carry this rod around that has the device on it, and basically it'll just guide him to where the shutoff is. Tell you what direction to move to get there, and just basically zero in on that location. So
yeah, that would even be helpful in the village. Even when you have measurements, it gets you close. But one of the problems is people cover them over, so they become very difficult to find. And the closer you can get, the quicker you can find a valve. And in some cases, they're extremely hard to find if they've been covered over, with soil, or in some cases, some people have blacktopped over them.
Didn't the developer have a responsibility to provide this information to us as the project went on, or not?
Tom, I've seen maps, especially for Victorian landings. It's just a matter of, as part of this whole discussion, we need to be able to figure a way to convert that into this system. That's actually a good point, that there's always going to be, I mean, in the future, you could specify it that you need it to be whatever system you develop as part of this program. But right now, what you have is you'll have a combination of things that will have to meld together for you.
Thank you.
It seems to me like a pretty good thing to get done, and good value with the grant money.
I
I
agree.
think it'll make things a lot simpler, and maybe save some time, and time is money. So I think that will overall reduce the cost too over the long term.
And I did get confirmation from DOH today that they support this almost very enthusiastically, and support this concept. So there won't be any eligibility problems as far as I can see at this point. I did mention in my email that you might want to buy the equipment, or actually obtain or procure the equipment. So that would be the only snag, is if they for some reason thought that was a problem. But it just seems like a good idea. And it's not it doesn't seem like it's going to be a huge cost either. So unless there's anything more on that, I'll just roll into probably the more debatable item, which is I'll call it generically chlorine feed enhancements. If you remember, one of the early options was, and I almost think it was someone at DOH suggested it, was relocation of the chlorine feed downstream of the tank. And the way we wrote up the preliminary report was that we would, kind of keep it as a tool in the toolbox if any of the other approaches to DBP reduction were not successful. So again, my job is to tell you that this was in the project budget. If closing wasn't a closing date wasn't a concern, I would certainly suggest we wait and see what we have in terms of results from the spray aeration system, and then decide if we have to do some further enhancement and I'll say optimization, I guess, of the chlorine feed to minimize formation of the disinfection byproducts. So essentially what this would mean is we have to put in a couple concrete structures downstream of the storage tank, still up at the tank site, presumably. And we probably have to build a small building or a shed to contain chlorine feed equipment. Admittedly, it leads to 2 separate facilities up at the tank site, which isn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world. But if you need to do a little more to make sure you solve this problem, again, it's my job to just say it was there, it's a fundable piece. If you close down the project and need to do it, you won't be able to obtain the 60% grant funding for it, or it would be doubtful that you would.
But this would, Mike, be downstream from the tank. So Victorian Landings would be out of the picture.
Correct. As they're pretty much sitting there almost as an arm of Clifton Park Water Authority anyway, in terms of their DBP levels. But you're right. It's a good point. You remembered that concept that Victorian Landings is its own thing.
Okay.
Again, we can circle back to that as needed. I have a feeling that's probably going to draw the most comment here. Again, if we go ahead with some of this stuff, it'll be some increased services for us, and we've reached our cap so far. So we'd have to, depending on what was needed to be done, we'd have to ask for an amendment number 6. So again,
Can I just add my 2 cents to the chlorine
sure.
enhancement? So my thoughts on it are, to start off with, we've been, in terms of a rolling average anyway, been in compliance for a relatively long time now, and that the chlorine feed enhancements will result in, a marginal reduction in THMs at best. And so I did a little math. I did correct my earlier math, Mike, because I did not take into account the grant money, but just based off of what the interest rate differential might be and our chances of actually needing this down the road, and needing it really means that we fall now out of compliance with the numbers. So basically, from the numbers I ran anyway, and taking into account the grant money, the only way we would really, and assuming that if we did need to do the enhancement and we had not taken it out of the EFC, that we were able to get that 60,000 from, for instance, the general fund. that the difference in costs, unless, you know, there was an absolute almost 100% chance we needed it down the road. In most other situations, financially, it would cost us less because, you know, we would take, you know, either we don't need it at all and we save ourselves the 40% of 60,000 plus interest over the terms of the loan, or if we do need it, you know, we're paying for it essentially upfront without loaning it out. So in most situations, you know, either we're not going to need it at all, and if we do need it, if the interest rates go up even a little bit, it's better to you know, pay for that out of the fund should we need it, versus getting it, you know, and instead of waiting another year and potentially the interest rates, even if the interest rates go up 0.25%, you know, it basically can make a big difference in terms of the overall interest that we're going to pay on the life of the loan. So I think the first thing I will say is that I don't think we're going to need it, because I think our numbers have been in compliance for a while, and I think the benefit is marginal. And the second thought is that even if we did, under most scenarios with interest rate, we're probably going to make out better anyway in the long run, even if we don't get the 60% grant funding. So that's just my thoughts on it. And, you know, in terms of a fiscal point of view, and also just looking at where we've been trending with THMs in general. So.
And I might add to Matt's comments that if we were able to kick the can down the road in terms of closing this out, this is something we could revisit while we're still within the parameters of the timeline for the loan.
Yeah, so I guess, Tom, what I'm saying is that my preference is to close out at the end of this year, knowing that it's likely that there's going to be at least a 0.25% hike in the interest rates by the end of 2022, under the idea that it's very unlikely we're going to need it anyway, and it's provides such a minimal overall benefit. You know, that to me, to do it now just in case and spend it, you know, it's 40% of 60,000 that we would be loaning out, you know, plus the interest over the life of the loan. To me, it's not, the cost of doing it in terms of the payment is not worth the odds that we're actually going to need it, you know. So in other words, to your point, we could wait till 2022, monitor everything, see how things are going, and then make a decision then. But then we run the risk of having, you know, if there's a 0.25% or a 0.5% hike in interest rates between 21 and 22, then it costs a lot more money to wait. You know, to wait an additional year costs more money for us potentially. Now it could be that the rates stay the same. I doubt very much that the rates will decline. I'm just running it as sort of what are the odds of various scenarios happening. I think it's much more likely that there's going to be an interest rate hike, than we're going to need to move the chlorine feed downstream to reduce THMs by a few parts per million. Just my thoughts.
I have a question on
Yeah.
the interest rates and the closing.
Yeah.
I understand how interest rates might go up. To close out at the end of this year, do we have to make that decision before we get the August numbers? I mean, what's the timing of that? I didn't recall.
Yeah, Paul, you're gonna need to make that decision pretty soon, probably within the next few weeks or within the next month, based on the last time I did this, which was last year. It pretty much, you're gonna have to make that decision soon.
Right. Well, then my question is, let's just say we decided by our next meeting in 2 weeks that we're going to close out at the end of this year. Would we still be able to do the other things on that list, not the chlorination, but the mapping and maybe the leakage?
What would
That was my question too.
my
Thanks,
experience with this, and again, we can get this confirmed tomorrow in the conference call, but item 8C somewhat talks of this. My experience is that EFC will allow you to close long-term as long as you have any engineering amendments and construction change orders executed. So in terms of what we're gonna help you with on these other pieces, or if it's a contract with a leak survey firm or a contract with a firm that's gonna get you the uh, the survey equipment, as long as you have those contracted by X date, that's okay. The work doesn't need to be done by the closing. The work can go beyond the closing. In fact, that's happening right now on a project that closed in December 2020. We still got another 3-4 months more work to do. It's just we were able to fast track change orders for any construction work that we needed to get done. And in this case, I think you're leaning toward no construction work. So it's really just how much you do with us or other vendors and just have those contracts executed and approved by DOH by a certain date.
So with
I
that,
don't know. Go ahead,
okay, with
Paul.
that in mind, I think I agree with probably with what Matt was saying was, I would think that I lean toward closing this year, forgetting the chlorine for now because it's kind of a crapshoot and we wouldn't necessarily lose money if we even had to pay for it down the road. But I like the idea of the, especially the mapping project. And it sounds like the leakage survey would only cost us about 2,000, I think, and 3,000 to the grant. So if that seemed like a good thing, I'd, but especially the mapping, I'd love to probably close, but get those included.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I don't know how anybody else feels about the chlorine enhancement, but I guess that's just my personal opinion on it, is that I feel like it's a minimal benefit. Even though we do get the grant funding, it's still money that we're still going, it's still $24,000 that we have to think about as trustees about whether we're going to spend that money and repay it as a loan. So I know it's tempting to just take the 60%, but to me, I feel like it's 24,000 that we, plus interest, that we could better put elsewhere down there. I mean, I know it's not like we're paying this out of any specific fund. It's going to be a loan, but I just think fiscally it's a responsible thing to do, given what we know about what this might do, and the fact that we're in compliance pretty good right now, even without the aerator, to be honest with you. So
I can't argue with the logic.
Yeah.
I just needed, as I said, I needed to make sure you guys were aware of
no, you have
what you could
responsibility.
possibly do. And if you wanted to have that safety valve to do something by keeping the project open, but this is exactly how it played out with that other one. They decided to pull the trigger and close because they foresaw that it would get them closed at the time of really low interest rate, because they were also a market loan. And and I don't know if, while we're talking about this, I'll just explain what I understand of the process. I think we'll learn tomorrow that it won't be till like November that what interest rate you'll close at. I think they go and shop that rate in November, and that defines that rate, and then it happens sometime in December. And
so, I've done a little reading around it, and I follow this stuff relatively closely. And from nobody can forecast what interest rates are going to be, but from everything I've read is that 21 is going to mainly hold pat, and that 22 is when it's likely that there will be some hikes. But again, we don't know till we know. I'm a fan of sort of gaming it out and seeing what are the more likely scenarios. And to me, I lean towards the fact that there will be a hike next year. So if we wait and leave the project open, we're likely to pay more over the life of the loan for the chance that something won't necessarily work. And again, Mike, I thank you for bringing it to our attention and doing your due diligence to make sure that we're aware of of all of the options we have. So I'm not shooting the messenger at all. I'm just stating how I feel about it.
No.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'd probably go along with Matt and Paul on this. It's probably better to close it out and do those couple of things that we need, that seem to make the most sense, and move on.
2.
So John, is there anything else in the, do you need any hydrants replaced? Is there any sort of dumb little stuff that you might want to just do?
Well, actually, there are a couple hydrants, older hydrants out on Hurlahide Road that are in need of rebuilding or replacing. They work extremely hard. That's really, there's, one of them out there that we're having issues with. Whether if it can just be rebuilt or not. Every year I have to fool with it to get it to work smoothly.
Well, see, that seems like a perfect candidate for getting it fixed. But and just so you know, we don't have to make a federal case out of this work. Another project I did, the community just worked with their local contractor, got a quote, and we do a very abbreviated construction contract, and I would assume that can be done here as well. So if the board is interested in this, I would suggest that you have John go get a proposal, or the number of proposals you see that are needed to meet your procurement policy, and just get those quotes to me, and we can turn those into construction contracts for DOH approval.
That would actually, because now I think about it, I mean, there's also one on New York Avenue. I don't even know if the company's in business any longer. It's one of the originals from way back. But
why wouldn't you just replace it and make it like all your other ones?
Exactly. Yes.
Anyway, I mean, that's the board's decision whether you want to do this or not. But I'm just, again,
If there's any I's to be dotted or T's to be crossed and little cleanup items, I mean, it makes sense to me to do those things. I don't know if
Maybe, can we do all that and officially sign off on this, let's say in June?
well, we'll find out tomorrow, Tom, what the drop dead contracting date is. I mean, I may need to get you any engineering amendments by your next meeting. I would rather have it roll into June, like you're saying, but it may have to be by the next meeting.
right. Johnny, can you maybe come up with like a little bit of a honey-do list and talk with Gary, and then he can kind of get it out to the board about what these little
I can. I
like
think
hydrants. Yeah.
we have we have also one down on Route 9 that's part of the old system, and Mueller, and we have some oddballs, and they are the older ones that, I will do that.
All right.
I'll get
Thanks.
together and get in fact, estimate.
The key to all this is to try to keep it below your procurement threshold. I don't know if you're a $20,000 community or a $35,000 community in terms of your contracting threshold. I think 35 is the state threshold. I think a lot of villages and towns use 20. You'd want to keep the work below that so you don't have to go out to bid. Because that's what DOH is going to just say. As long as you meet your procurement policy, you can do it through this small contract approach.
I think we can do that. In fact, I'll make a phone call when we get done with this meeting and get it rolling.
Okay. Last thing I'll throw out to you guys, I mean, I think the direction's pretty clear here. Just given that your you're gonna be closing on such a smaller project, should you be looking at a 20-year payback instead of the 30?
I mean, I'd like to see the numbers, but I think it makes sense. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't do that.
Absolutely.
All right. Was there anything we needed to double back to? Because we just got the call tomorrow. Who's on that? Is it just me and Gary and Bob Hafner?
Jessica,
Oh, that's right. Yep. Yep. And
What
Kim?
time is it, Gary, tomorrow?
1 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to make it tomorrow.
It was the only time Bob was available. I know you.
Yeah, Yeah, that's fine. It's literally the worst 4 days of my life right now. So if it was any other week, I'd be able to do it, but
All right. If there's nothing else, I think we're done with that.
yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Mike.
Did you need me to stay on the call for anything else, John, or the board?
I don't think so. I don't think it'll be too much longer.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Mike.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank-
Mike.
So we are pretty much agreed on leakage survey, water valve, hydrant and curb stop mapping project, and oddball fire hydrants.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any other, I mean, Mike just threw that one out there, the fire hydrant thing, which I had never considered. I don't know if there's any other cleanup items that are to do with water that, I mean, Johnny can just rack his brain over for a little bit. And if it, even if it's small, I mean, it's worth getting the grant money for it if we're going to need to do it. So that's the only thing I would add is if there's any other kind of those cleanup items. Maybe there's not, but now's the time. And it looks like we're going to have kind of a short time frame to figure those things out. So
Was there any other business?
Not under the on the agenda, but I guess I'd like to make another pitch here on the rezoning and exclusively on RV1. I mean, I think it's pretty clear, if you haven't read things, I'm sure we all have, that Saratoga County is now the fastest growing county in the state. We're going to get another global boundaries, 90% or more certain. Virtually every piece of property. And I just noticed this the other day. I was going up, if you go Route 9 north, past the first roundabout, there's an old house near that sits pretty close to Route 9. It's got to be from the early 1900s. It's fallen apart. It's unoccupied. Trees are growing out of the roof and everything. But just beyond there, on the left, you can see into a clearing, and it looks like a couple dozen acres are being cleared out. Now, somebody told me that that's going to be a hotel. I have no idea, but I guess I'm more and more concerned that our zoning in RV1 is not going to prevent the kind of development that we may not want to see here in Round Lake. I see Round Lake as an oasis from all of this. So far, we've been pretty successful. We've had what we've had, but we still have a lot of property. And I guess what I'm asking is, would we want to consider rezoning this RV1 at the very minimum to single family homes only and take out all the other stuff? Because I know you can do duplexes, and I don't know what RV1 says. Peter will help me, I'm sure. But I think we're going to lose the opportunity here within the next 2-3 years, especially if we get another global foundries. And I don't want to see this stuff like we've seen up by on the way up by Dunning Street, crossing the police, or this thing out here, Timber Creek on, I mean, it's gonna look like that if we don't change our RV1 zoning. And I say no harm, no foul. You're gonna get pushback on this. And I can argue with the lot size, we can quibble over it. But if you only bring it down to single family only, you've cut out an awful lot of the ugliness to this kind of stuff. So, you know, really like to make a pitch to try to rezone it. I know the attorney's not here tonight, so I wouldn't put too much on his, you know, I can't put anything on his shoulders. But I don't know how you guys feel about this, what your vision is, whether you think it's worthwhile doing, what we should do to try to stop it. Should we try to do a moratorium? I have no idea, but I think things are going to change here even more in the next 2, 3, 4 years than they've changed in the last 10. And if we want to keep this village the way it is, an oasis, kind of like a Saturday, and people think, oh boy, it's really nice village. It's not like Country Knolls. It's not like the townhouses. So I guess I'm saying I'd be willing to do anything. Hopefully, if we could get some support to make some changes.
Well, I certainly, for one, agree with your vision. And it was my recollection that you were going to head up a zoning as the next step of the comprehensive plan, head up a group that was going to look at the zoning, and that would certainly be part of that.
I certainly will do that. I think what I'd like to do is, if I did that, I'd like it to be a little conditional. I'd like to have a manageable group of, you know, I think big committees don't accomplish anything except delay. I can't be there, come in late, you got to rehash things. You know, if you had a small group of people, 3, 4, 5 people, I'd also like to have a time, a definitive time for a report to the board. And you know, and if it was legal, I'd like to see some type of moratorium until we got such a report. And I'd like to actually have a report to give to the board.
Moratorium on what?
On building, I don't see, and I don't think there's anybody else here tonight that I have to worry about, but I mean, I don't think the big parcels are the only one that we know of that's in, I would say, jeopardy is the one up New York Avenue. And I think there's a consensus, or at least what I've heard is that it's going to be too expensive for the guy to do it. But we haven't heard anything about any of the other big parcels. So I guess I'm looking for some advice on going forward. Do we need to do a moratorium, or should we just put a group together to start looking at this stuff, or how do you guys want to do it?
Well, I seem to recall a moratorium a couple decades ago. Do you recall
Yeah.
what that was about, what that prohibited?
There was a building moratorium a couple decades ago, and I can't remember. Tom Peterson would probably help. It may have been related to what was going on in Clifton Park. Because I think Clifton Park had a moratorium prior to, or just after, or around the time Exit 8A was being considered. So it was quite a long time ago. And I think we had done the same thing because we were looking at what we were going to do here, and nothing had happened. There was no Victorian Landings, there was no Griffin's Ridge, there was nothing around us, none of these other places. But I can't remember the specifics of why we did that, and I don't know the legalities of it.
Should we put it on the agenda in 2 weeks? Because won't Tom be here then? And we can discuss this issue and organize the committee or something, or launch it.
I'd really like to move forward with this. I think we're living on borrowed time. And, you know,
Boy, do I agree with you, Tom.
I agree with
Yeah.
Tom, with your, as Gary said, I agree with your vision. I agree that we all want to preserve the nature of the village. I'm just not sure what the tools are that we're going to use and the levers that we're going to pull to accomplish that. And I don't know necessarily whether it's, you know, removing different home types. I don't know that that's maybe the right path forward. I think there might be other paths. So I'd like to see it investigated to see what options there are. But I think every single person on this call right now agrees with you that we don't want the village to devolve into, you know, some of the things that we've seen around us. So,
and I think there's some smart zoning. It doesn't have to be 1 acre or
Right.
anything, but
right.
you know, some kind of cluster zoning with
Yeah.
you know, large swaths of
Yeah.
of green space and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I just think it's time that we really decide whether or not the big parcels that we have left, you know, what's going to happen to them. I think this stuff's going to happen pretty fast. It's going to happen within a couple of years.
Can I just make a comment? I don't know if I'm on.
Yeah,
You're
you're
on.
Okay, I know that I just blows my mind to see Malta look at the old gun club down on, I guess it's Ruley Road at the end there. It's
Yep.
about 12 acres. The owner who bought that about 5 or 6 years ago, it's land conservation. He bought it because he wanted to store some things there. Well, he changed his mind. He wants to build 33 houses there. So they're considering doing it, changing the zoning from land conservation so this guy could build 33 homes, right, you know, right at the end of it. Just doesn't make sense to me. And I think, Tom, you're right, it's exploding. If you go to look and see what's going on at the Malta Planning Board, it's scary.
Well, you know, Malta will rezone anything as long as they get the construction. That's the, you know, they rezoned something up on the north end of town. They're looking at rezoning Luther Forest, you know, so they seem to be desperate to get stuff built out. I think it's kind of the opposite mentality around here. We want to take a smart approach to it. Not to say there's never going to be any construction, but the type of construction that we want to see in the village is the type of construction that, you know, fits in with the village and the character of the village. So
It almost seems like Malta is on a hamster wheel where they just have to keep.
Yeah.
yeah,
promoting-
well, that's what happens when you don't have a town tax and you're beholden to, you know, constantly trying to increase your assessment to keep up with the Joneses. And the Joneses are Ballston and Half Moon and Clifton Park, and they're all growing like wildfire. And that's why Saratoga is growing like wildfire, because all of those towns are growing like wildfire. So unless you keep up with them, your, you know, assessment goes down and you get less sales tax revenue. And, you know, that's what they have to do. They have to keep spinning the hamster wheel. And it's unfortunate because I think eventually people are going to go, what the heck did this town turn into? Or maybe they're saying that right now. But to Tom's point, I don't want us to be saying it about Round Lake down the road.
No, and neither do I. And I think that, you know, we have you know, we always talk about this. It's so unique, but it's so geographically unique. You know, we're hemmed in, Route 9, the Northway, Malta, and then Clifton Park to the south. And we have people come in here and I can't tell you how many times I hear, well, we all hear it. So what a lovely little community this is. What a peaceful, you know, place this is. And, you know, I guess we've let go of, for different reasons, we've let go of Victorian landings. We let go of Griffin's Ridge. People had rights to do what they had to do there. But we don't have to let it go much further. And we can make, if we're going to have any kind of development, we should make it sane development. And
Yes,
I guess that's my point.
We have one key thing that the other places don't, and that is, and we should keep this definition in mind, we're a village. You know, we're not a town or a county or a city. And we should always keep in mind what our vision of a village is. And it's not, in my mind, it's not a place with big office complexes or anything like that. or other big complexes. So we want to keep it a village.
Yeah,
Well, I also think we need to think about the south down by Clifton Park as well. It was just a couple of years ago that, someone approached us. I know Gary was involved in that a little bit. Someone tentatively was talking about a 2-story office building, right over the line, in Clifton Park, and wanted to know if they could tie into our water. And that kind of fell apart, but it was a wake-up call for me that, right down there, we're going to have or could have office buildings. And we still have some larger parcels open down there. There's just a generally open feel, and I'm not sure what we do about that, but when Wood Road goes, that's going to have a big difference, not just on my street, but how everybody gets to, in and around to the Northway and to Route 9.
Well, there is a solar panel plant going up on Wood Road, and Bogdan has a proposal. Bogdan Bodnar has a proposal for a soccer stadium, like a soccer dome bubble there, 30 acres, I think.
Mhm.
So stuff is happening.